All right, welcome to another episode. I'm Wyatt, and this is my co-host Darren. And currently, there's been a little bit of a controversial debate going on in the online world on X, and uh, Joe Rogan, famous for his controversial guest, decided he was going to have on neocon Douglas Murray and libertarian phenom right now. It feels like Dave Smith. So Dave Smith is well, to be honest with you, he's a comedian who's just very interested in politics and culture and all that sorts of things. And Douglas Murray is, I would argue, a pretty legitimate journalist. He's a neoconservative based out of Britain. He's been everywhere from North Korea to Ukraine to Israel to, I mean, you name it, he's probably been there, covering all the stuff in the whole world. And him and Dave Smith were basically debating this whole idea of, I mean, what it boiled down to me is like platforming on Joe Rogan, where, and Darren, you tell me if you agree or disagree, but it seemed like the first part of the debate was basically Douglas was running around screaming at Joe Rogan for having on completely unqualified people to talk about stuff they had no business talking about.
Yeah, that was basically it. It was contentious from the start. I
From the
mean,
jump, man.
oh yeah, within the first few seconds, I mean, Douglas Murray, he asked Joe, like, why he's having on people like Ian Carroll and this Daryl Cooper character. And he's really, I guess he takes umbrage with Daryl Cooper's comments about Churchill, maybe because he's British, who knows. But I think the overarching theme of like that podcast was like the credentialists versus the, I guess, independent investigate, or people who kind of get into these subjects as a hobby and then opine on them. And
The free thinkers.
yeah, oh yeah, the free thinkers. That's a good way to characterize them. And I think in one way, I wonder if it's almost just a case of the British mind versus the American mind. Because in America, there is a strain of Americans who probably are more credentialist, like Douglas Murray, but I would say the vast majority of Americans are tend to be more free thinker types, like to think for themselves, and to them, the experts don't mean as much. But what were your just thoughts on it in general? Uh,
Well, it was kind of a weird thing for me because I honestly dislike both people on this podcast. I dislike Dave Smith because I think he's naive, and I think that it's not just him, libertarian theology or not theology, politics, ideology. It just doesn't make any sense from anyone's perspective. It's not possible. It's childish to me, actually. Just to be completely honest. And Douglas Murray, I couldn't think of a worse person to argue for like the credentialed side and elitism than him, because like
oh yeah, talk
he's
about
he was so he defended all of the worst possible things you can think of: torture, the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan. Like when you're talking about like being credentialed, like you should probably bring somebody on who's like who wasn't wrong about those things. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
but I would say there were a couple of different times I agreed with both of them. As much as I hate to say that, but I definitely lean more in Douglas's camp, which is that like experts are there for a reason, and the default should be like probably listen to them. You know?
Oh, okay. Well, that's actually interesting because I resonated more with Dave Smith, even though I'm not really too big a fan of his. Uh, for a host of reasons, libertarianism being one of them. But I would say I resonated more with his perspective of just, thinking things, thinking for yourself, credentials I think are important, but uh, I think Dave would agree with this. Like when you see pictures, a new gruesome picture every day from, Palestine, some kid being blown up or something, it just, uh, it means so much more than any excuse that could be given, to explain it away from people like Douglas Murray. But
Yeah, and I will agree just to touch on that. Like his whole argument, and this is why I said that like I don't like you couldn't have picked a worse person to argue for that perspective in my mind because like basically Douglas Murray's entire point about why Dave was wrong because he was like, "Well, have you ever even been to a checkpoint or the crossing point?" And Dave Smith was like, "I've never even been to Israel." And Douglas Murray was like, "You've never even been." Like that was a big deal to him, and I was like, "Okay, like you don't have to be somewhere." You know what I mean? Like
Out.
There are plenty. How many? Have you been to the crossing points?
No,
When were you last there at all?
I've never been.
You've never been.
Well, am I not allowed to talk about it now? I've never been to. Have you ever been to Nazi Germany? Are you allowed to have feelings about them?
You can't time travel, but you
Well,
can.
right.
But you can travel.
Okay, but so what? So what's the point? Like,
No,
okay.
I find that
Lots
very...
of people have been there and agree with me, and lots of people have been there and agree with you.
Yeah, but
so I
if
don't
you're
know
going
what
to
the.
spend a year and a half talking about a place, you should at least do the courtesy of visiting it.
All right.
oh
just didn't
yeah,
it was incredibly stupid. It's not an argument. It's not. I don't understand why he made that point.
oh yeah, and
Um,
and if anything, I mean, I think to a degree, I think that if you're looking at like just statistics and numbers online, you can get, in terms of like Palestinian deaths, dismemberments, the amount of food getting in, and the imagery you can see. I think that paints the clearest possible picture. You're not going to be able to ascertain, how much food is really getting in, how many people are dying, how much sickness is spreading just by one visit, one controlled visit, I might add, to Israel and Gaza. Because Douglas Murray, he actually, he did go to Gaza. The IDF like they took him on kind of a tour, I guess. It's he actually sat in. I don't know if you saw the picture, but that Yahya Sinwar, the chair he died in, Douglas Murray sat in it for a photo op,
oh,
or
good
at
Lord,
least.
I did not see that. Are you serious? That's disgusting,
Oh
actually.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He sat in it as like
Okay.
a, I don't know. I guess as a symbol of power, or that's the chair that they purport to be the one that Yahya died in. Anyways, all that to say, I mean, it's fair to say Douglas likely received a very skewed view of what the, war was like, by going there. So, to the extent, any illumination was offered, I by him going there, I mean, I think to a degree, I mean, just looking at it through your screen paints a better picture than going there yourself. In one respect.
Yeah, I don't know if I buy that, to be honest with you. Like, I think that, like, being there and seeing how a crossing point is done and all that, I think that can give you, like, additional context to that, like, somebody who's just watching this from their phone in America, they're just not going to understand. You know what I mean? And that's not to say that you can't have opinions about the genocide, obviously, but you know what I mean? Like, I'm not
Oh
saying,
yeah, yeah.
I mean, I thought it was absurd the idea that Murray said that like, oh, if you would have just seen this crossing point, then you would understand that this whole time it's actually the innocent children's fault, right? That's why we have to bomb these poor hospitals, right? And like we have to do it. There's nothing we like. That's ridiculous, right? Especially, I mean, Dave said it best. Like, listen, there's people that's been over there that saw it and they agree with me, and there's people who went over there and saw it and agree with you. So like, what's your point? You know what I mean? Like,
Oh
uh,
yeah, definitely.
but I thought Douglas made a good point here, though, not to like kind of like slightly change what they're talking about. Joe Rogan does have a problem on his show. And he can platform whoever he wants. It's obviously incredibly successful and entertaining. But I definitely think it's dangerous in the sense that like whenever you have this many like fringe views, they become increasingly mainstream, right? Specifically about like COVID. He's had a bunch of flat earthers on. He's had a bunch of fake archaeologists on, like Graham Hancock, who, uh,
Yeah.
unfortunately, I grew up with a household that watched Ancient Aliens, and he's on there a lot. And but not just that, like real world stuff that actually matters. So, like if you believe in flat Earth and like the ancient civilization that was Atlantis or whatever, there's no real danger there, to be honest with you. But when you start believing in like COVID denial, like like whenever Obama was a birther, like you remember that whole thing, the
Oh
moon
yeah.
landing being fake, and then of course like the Ukraine debacle, and then now Murray is arguing that he's promoting and having on guests that are borderline Holocaust denial, you know?
Yeah, and thinking too about the Ukraine thing, I consume some Joe Rogan content, not a ton. I don't listen to him like every week even. So I don't know to what degree this is 100% true, but the impression I get, one of Murray's critiques is that Joe Rogan seems to platform more of the Ukraine critical crowd versus the uh, versus more establishment mainstream thinker, pro Ukraine thinkers. And on one hand, it's like, well, it's his show; he can do whatever he wants. But I think Joe does purport to be a supporter of Ukraine, or at least he sees Ukraine as being the lesser of the two evils. So you would think that, you know, it would be perhaps a little more responsible to push, I don't know, a more pro Ukraine, bring on more uh, explicitly pro Ukraine guests. You know, I mean, if that's, I don't, I mean, on one hand, it's like,
Well, I mean, listen.
I see the point, but it's on the other hand, it's like, well, here I am, like talking on my show about what other people on their shows should do. So, you know,
Right.
I, I don't know.
Right. Well, I
I
mean,
kind of had a, fledgling thought there, but I've kind of, yeah, I don't know.
yeah.
I'm wishy washy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just think that it's weird. So, like, whenever you've got a guy that has a platform the size of Joe Rogan, right? Um, you have got to be careful about what you platform and promote, right? Whether it's Alex Jones or whether it's, I mean, listen, the fact is that if he didn't have those wacky people on those podcasts, like his show would not be as popular. And I'm not saying that those people made him popular. I'm just saying that like that's kind of what his audience is right now. They're just the ultimate conspiracy theorist for a lot of different things, you know? Like whether it's like I said, whether it's one of those billion different things. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think the conspiracies are kind of what makes, like you said, what makes Joe Rogan interesting because all the other guests are like MMA fighters or like, some kind of like health guru of some kind. And I find those episodes to be really boring. And so this was actually one of the best episodes I think he's had in a long time.
Yeah, he
I
should he should do more of these, honestly.
Oh yeah, I kind of get sick of like, the typical Joe Rogan episode where I don't know, it just seems kind of vapid. I mean, that sounds mean because I actually like Joe Rogan. It's just I don't know. There's usually nothing that makes me want to listen to it for 3 hours.
Yeah, he should do honestly, like he does a pretty okay job moderating. I thought he did good about like letting them both talk and like he didn't really interject too much. It was mostly just Dave and Douglas going at it. So, I mean, I like that.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know, let me just ask you this. I mean, do you see a problem with him like platforming like some people like and kind of almost like promoting like fringe views at all?
No, I don't have a problem with it. In fact, I wish he'd go further. I
Really?
think, yeah, earlier I was being a little more charitable, I guess, to Douglas Murray's point of like, maybe platforming the people you agree with if you want to push a narrative. But I mean, that's not really Joe Rogan's thing. So, yeah, I think Joe Rogan should go even farther, and people from the extreme right or even the extreme left, heck, if he wants to do that, that'd be I would find that interesting. I don't think it's interesting to just platform people within the bounds of what's acceptable. I think he should invite on radicals of all kinds. I mean, whether it be communists, fascists, radical
That is so
feminists or
insane.
something.
This is so crazy. Why? Like why?
Oh, it's
Um
interesting. New points of view. Maybe
No,
they'll
we
have
don't
a point
need
that'll
no, no, no,
surprise you.
no, 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 no. No, because if listen, if Joe Rogan was this like omniscient being, like that would be fine because then he could debunk him in real time. But the problem is that like whenever you have a guy, like let's just say Matt Walsh, right? And you have
Mhm.
a guy like that on who literally is like,
But if they admit that they're wrong, then they're also admitting that they have horribly disfigured and abused thousands, maybe millions of kids.
How many people have had this done?
Depends on what. I don't think we have exact numbers, but if we're talking about the drugs, I mean, millions.
You're talking about hormone blockers.
Yeah,
Millions of
blockers
kids have been on hormone blockers. Really?
I'm sure someone's going to fact check me on it, but my guess is that we're into the millions now at this point. Yeah, that would be my guess. I could say for double mastectomies, I read a report recently that there were over 1,000 done between 2016 and 2019, and when you compare that to how many were done between 2008 and 2015, it's a massive increase, and over 1,000 girls had gender affirming double mastectomies in that time frame.
And when you say girls, you're talking about prepubescent,
right? Minors, and that's just up until 2019, and then we know that there's been this exponential increase with all this stuff year over year. So it's a lot. It's too many. Having this happen to one kid is way too many. It's a lot more than one.
Yeah, and look, if you're an adult and you want to do that, and you understand who you are and what you are, and this is how you feel you should progress, you're an adult. This is a free country. You should be able to do whatever you want. But when you're talking about doing that to children, the fact that so many people are on board and so many people are angry, if you have people are going to be angry at us that we're having these conversations.
Yeah, they will be. And I actually think that this shouldn't be happening to.
It's a very small number, if that's right.
It says over the last 5 years, there were at least 4,780 adolescents who started puberty blockers and had a prior gender dysphoria diagnosis.
It says it's kind of undercounted, but that
would be a big
less than
undercounting.
1,000 people a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would guess hundreds of thousands at this, but I could be wrong.
Million sounds great.
there are millions of kids undergoing surgeries to become like gender swapping surgeries, and then they look it up and the number for surgeries is like zero, and the number for hormones is like in the thousands, and over like 5 years, you know what I mean? Like when you're that wrong and you can't fact check them in real time, I think that's dangerous.
Well, to as a
when you have
counterpoint,
when you have the size of the platform he does.
Well, wasn't Matt? Because I remember this episode. Wasn't Matt Walsh basically debunked in real time by Jamie?
By
the
Jamie,
tech
not
guy?
by Rogan.
Well, it's not like Rogan is going to be able to Google while he interviews. That's why Jamie's there.
Right, but I'm just saying that, I mean, there are plenty of other times he doesn't fact check. Like, for example, like, do you remember, like, during all the COVID stuff? you know, like all of that. And then like the Ian Carroll podcast and the Daryl Cooper podcast, it was like, oh God. Um
Yeah,
and
I mean,
listen, Douglas Murray is coming at this from the perspective of like, listen, the right has like some increased like popularity in the mainstream. And if you go crazy, one of two things is going to happen. Either A, people are going to swing back left, or B, which he considers this even worse, is the right is just going to be increasingly fringe. Um like we're going to shift further to the right in ways that he doesn't like, you know? And
I see. Well, here's the thing though, like even with Douglas Murray, who I think was he presented a lot of facts and the validity and truthfulness of them. I think was dubious. Maybe I'd say about 70 to 80% of what Douglas Murray was saying was true, but I do remember even Doug, who was making all these claims against Joe Rogan. Even he, I noticed some things that I believe to be lies that he said. He peddled this myth of like mass rape on October 7th. There's not really much evidence that that occurred. And there were some other things, but I've kind of forgotten them since. But maybe
right. Well,
they'll.
listen, I'm not saying that Douglas like you. I mean, you know me. I'm not the most pro Mossad propaganda guy, right? But like I think that he has I'm gonna just say significantly higher baseline of fact than like the Dave Smiths of the world or the Candace Owens of the world. Even though I probably disagree with him more on the issue. So like take Candace Owens for an example, right? So on like if you were to add up all of our stuff, right? I probably agree with Douglas more, but like I would consider Candace more of an ally if that makes any sense. Like
No, that makes sense. I
it's
mean, it depends on the issues you really care about, I guess.
right, but like Douglas could, we could go like this is a fact, this is an opinion, this is a fact, this is an opinion. With Candace, like there is no doing that. With Dave Smith, a lot of the time there is no doing that. With millions of other random people, right? You cannot agree on the baseline of fact, which is what he's worried about, and that's why, hell, that's why he was there, right? Um, to basically try and like level up his party because he's watching the right used to be the party of like intellectuals and college educated people, and then the Democratic base just, I mean, that's all they are now, right? Is these Ivy League elites and these college educated individuals, and he's like, well, he's like watching his movement become more dumb in America, and he doesn't like it. And I don't mean that like I mean that like that's literally true, and he hates it. He can't stand it.
Well, in that respect, I guess I do feel for him because trading in your, higher propensity, educated, smart, admirable base for a lower propensity, dumber base, uh, you know, it won the election, but I don't know how good it is in the long run. So, I I have some sympathy for him there. And to the Dave Smith and Candace Owens point, yeah, I'd agree that Candace basically is like I don't even know what you would call it. I guess she pushes tabloid level stories. Like, I mean, Brigitte Macron being a man. I mean, come on.
That I was about to bring that up. Like, give me a break, for
Yeah,
God's sake.
exactly. And when you do stuff like that, it's so discrediting to all the other stuff you believe. It's like, are we going to be a serious person, and like seriously criticize like Israel and stuff, or are you just going to be peddling filth? Because honestly, what that does when she pushes stories like Brigitte Macron is a man, it colors everything else she pushes as being totally loony. So it pushes being like anti-Israel or critical of Israel even to this like conspiracy tier thing.
Exactly what I'm. This is my problem here. So like even guys like for example like Ryan Grimm at Dropsite News, like they have like reporters on the ground live every day reporting exactly what Douglas is complaining about, and because of people like Candace Owens, like Nick Fuentes, like Jake Shields, Ian Carroll and Daryl Cooper, like even all those guys, what they allow guys like Douglas Murray to do is be like, oh well, that's just a fringe right wing conspiracy. Like, don't even worry about it. Even though like Dropsite News is fairly, I mean, it's not like the New York Times, but I mean, it's accredited, right? Like it's it's not.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, here I mean, I don't consume a ton of Dave's content. From what I saw though on this appearance, he seemed to be fairly credible, and I think Dave and Nick are both intelligent individuals. They seem to kind of relay the facts. Jake Shields, I don't think he's quite. I mean, he doesn't seem quite as intelligent. Certainly, Candace Owens doesn't seem to be honest at all. I mean, I think if you, I think if you're pushing stories like Brigitte Macron is a man, you're just a dishonest actor.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
would I would agree that like Candace Owens is like definitely a tier above conspiracy wise and like credibility wise, but like Dave Smith, like, and I consume a fair amount. I mean, I'm not this honestly. It's mostly by accident. Like he just talks to everybody. So like he did a, it was years ago, a show with Sam Cedar. Like he'll debate literally pretty much anyone. But like specifically like about like Ukraine, like the dude, like he's not big picture enough, right? Like he thinks that Ukraine is literally just a money laundering scheme to like keep the war machine going and kill innocent civilians in Eastern Europe and all of that. And I'm like, all right, well that no, like just flat out none of that's true. You know, when you're that level of wrong, I don't know where to begin. Like, are some people getting rich off of this war? I mean, maybe, right? But probably not, right? Like, I would,
Yeah, and that was one
and
of the things brought up. He said, his defense of why he's so hard on Ukraine, Dave Smith, that is, on this podcast, was that it's more interesting to criticize the people closer to us rather than our enemies who are just de facto bad. So it's more uh, I don't know, intellectually rigorous, I guess, to criticize your allies. But I kind of disagree. I feel like to an extent, all this criticism of Ukraine is just unnecessary, and honestly, I think it does more harm than good. I'd rather I'd rather the right and the left be fully on side uh,
right.
Ukraine rather than, even if there are some abuses of power and corruption over in Ukraine, which I'm sure there are. I'd rather the American public not even hear of it, because ultimately, I would like to see Russia, diminished, or perhaps President Putin. I'd like to see him resign, or perhaps be well, I don't know what we can see on YouTube, eliminated. I'd like to see
Oh,
Putin eliminated.
goodness. Well,
So
I mean, listen, I mean, this you run into this all the time with people who think too small picture, and this is one of the great many points I agreed with Douglas on. So you have a guy like Dave Smith who kind of he's too small picture, he's too in the weeds, and I shouldn't say in the weeds that like he has all the facts. That's not what I mean. I mean like he's trying to find another. So for Ukraine, for example, he's trying to find a way around the fact that Russia invaded a country that we promised to defend, right? And he's trying to get around that fact by saying that, like, oh, we shouldn't be doing all that. And it's like you can do this with any, like, major political figure ever. Like, you like take FDR for example, right? So this happens all the time where like they'll talk about like how FDR forced us into World War II because he stopped selling oil to the Japanese Empire and that forced them to attack Pearl Harbor. And it takes a, for God's sakes, you would think it was obvious, but it takes a historian to stand up in front of a microphone and say, "No, the reason we got involved in World War II is because the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor." Like, if they wouldn't have done that, like, it wouldn't have mattered, right? And you could do this with Lincoln, you could do this with Washington, you can do this with Churchill, which a bunch of people are currently right now doing with Churchill. That's kind of what started all of this. Is people think that if they lived around back then, they're like, I wouldn't own any slaves, I'd have done all the things right, I wouldn't have done the Treaty of Versailles. And it's like, that's not, first of all, you're ridiculous. This this is low. I think this is like low IQ stuff. Like, even if you were around back then, you wouldn't have been able to read everything and know everything. So, like, what the hell makes you think you'd make all the right decisions too? You know?
Oh yeah, and then going back to your point about the Japanese, and this was something I remember from the podcast, and I did want to touch on it. I think Douglas actually made a good point. How like people like Dave Smith, and there are a lot of them. They seem to think that only Americans have agency, and then everyone else is like, a victim or a product of our foreign policy. He mentioned like the Euromaidan uprising, I guess, where all the students in Ukraine overthrew the pro-Russian government, and basically, and he said, well, America played a role in that, and it's like, yeah, we support, people who are pro NATO. We support people who are, pro Western democracy. But that doesn't mean that there wasn't already that organic movement. We just gave them a little, gave them a little boost where we could. I
Oh,
mean,
100%. And I have the same criticism of, I don't know if you know who Noam Chomsky is, but like that's basically all he does in a sentence. It's a noun and a verb, and America did this 30 something years ago, and that's why we are where we are. And I'm like, can we have a little bit more like agency for these other citizens, right? Like, none
oh
of this
yeah,
makes any sense, Like, I can see very clear some stuff, A to B, right? But like whenever you have to go to like M N, I'm like, yeah, get out of here. Like, it's ridiculous.
exactly. I mean, if anything, the support these people get from America, whether it be the Euromaidan uprising, or even the stuff that happened like during the Arab Spring. I mean, these were organic movements that we might have put some money towards, but it's not. I don't know. It's not like these people didn't want these things.
Right, right, yeah. And like this is just like my last thing, and then we can go on to the next subject. But
Oh yeah, I think we've.
yeah, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but like at the end of the day, like Dave Smith, he has no respect for credentialed historians, right? And he'll actually go out of his way not to talk to them because he's afraid that he's like, I can't talk to them, they're gonna know everything. Like, well, that's kind of the point, Like, if he could talk to like whether it's like a modern historian or like a Churchill guy or American foreign policy historian, he won't because that's and I agree with Douglas on this. I hate to say it, God, I hate to say it, but I mean at the end of the day, a lot of this stuff is clickbaity, and they're just going to milk it for all the money it's worth because they know it's going to crush online. There is a sect of the population that lives terminally online that is just waiting for content that is conspiracy minded, and they're just waiting every day for the newest thing, whether it's him, whether it's even like Fuentes or somewhere like that, like they just can't get enough of it.
There certainly is an element of shock value that I think drives some of these things. To wrap it up, though, I do agree with some of Murray's criticisms of Smith, but ultimately, that the whole credentialist thing, elitist thing, I just can't get onto that. I can't quite agree with all that, but that's my final word on the matter.